Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculpture welled those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So the first thing to understand about Percy Shelley was they were a romantic poet. Now, the romantic movement was essentially a movement of poetry that specifically focused on nature and time and exotic lands, and criticised the ruling classes. Okay, and all of these apply to this poem. Okay, now also worth noting is Ozymandias is another name for Ramesses II, who's basically an Egyptian pharaoh. Okay, and the poem describes essentially a ruined statue of the once mighty pharaoh, and a pharaoh who had great power when alive, but now his image lies broken. Okay, as the quote boundless and bare landscape suggests. And this almost creates sympathy for the reader at first, because we see that the statue's face is sunk and shattered, and this adds to the impact when Shelley tells us of the pharaoh's cruelty, okay, of his frown, his wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, that suggests that this leader was a bit of a tyrant. Now, if we're going to go into techniques, one of the techniques that's quite obvious, should I say, is the sounds of letters that create essentially an atmosphere. It's called plosive alliteration, and the quote cold command adds to the sense that Pharaoh was an aggressive man. Okay. Furthermore, the use of sibilants, the S sound, runs throughout the poem, particularly in the description of a statue, which adds a sinister and cruel feeling. It's almost like a hissing. In terms of structure, this poem is a 14-line poem, which means it is a sonnet, and it is written in iambic pentameter. However, it breaks from the tradition of a Petrarchan sonnet rhyme scheme, as it splits as a Petrarchan sonnet would split up the 14 lines into two sections, an octave and a sestet. The octave being the first 8 lines, and the sestet being the remaining ones, where you normally have in the octave a problem, and then in the sestet it shows a solution. Okay, now Shelley's rhyme scheme means that these two sections are joined. Okay, so the sonnet itself is unified; it's one thing, unlike the statue. The impact of rhyme has a great impact in this poem. So the traditional rhymes seen in like land, sand, command, give the lines extra force and power. And you should pay attention to the poet's last rhyme, which is decay and away, which kind of adds the sense of loss, emptiness, and finality. In terms of sentence length, this really adds to meaning, where the line nothing beside remains. The fact that these 3 simple words stand out alone reflects the idea of the statue being reduced to virtually nothing, isolated in the lone level sands. Now, this links nicely onto the technique of enjambment, which is where lines of poetry run on to the next line without any punctuation. Now, this is seen at many points in the poem, but it has particular significance in the last 3 lines when describing the desert which surrounds the colossal wreck of the statue. And this really adds the sense that the sands stretch far away, and it's particularly effective when it comes after such a short sentence. The last 3 lines mirror the endless sands that surround the solitary statue. This could also be read as the fact that the enjambment represents how sort of nature is endless, it's ongoing, it cannot be stopped. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the use of extended metaphor. Now, extended metaphor is when a metaphor or an idea stretches over a period of lines. And essentially, this poem is one large extended metaphor, where it important to focus on this first line, I met a traveller. It's almost like someone telling you a story, which is significant because it almost makes the ruler Ozymandias, his legacy, sort of less important, because the poem speaker gives us a second-hand description of the statue, which the traveller, he once was, spoke and told him about. So the mighty pharaoh's legacy is reduced to a sort of a distant story. Now, poems that would compare well to this would be poems such as Storm on the Island or Exposure, as they both explore power of nature, and the Prelude, as they both explore the power of nature and the impact that nature has on people. William Wordsworth, the writer of the Prelude, was also a romantic poet, so there's a lovely comparison there. Hopefully this was helpful. Bye-bye.